Hi everyone, Andy here at Spymaster Gaming. Welcome back to the channel and a very warm welcome if it's your first time joining us. So today's video is going to be about a Grimdark Future tournament, a 2,000 point tournament I'm attending. It's a bit different from the other ones that I've attended historically in the sense that extra actions are in play, as well as systems damage. So a couple of unique quirky rules which will be coming out during the tournament. It's 4 games taking place at Worcester Wargames in the UK. And stay tuned to find out how I get on. First, I'm going to go into the army list that I'm taking, and then I'll give an overview of each game before showing footage. So, without further ado, here is the army that I'm taking. The first model I decided to take was the Spy Assassin from my Inquisition attachment. So 425 points, nearly a quarter of the army's total points value. I've used these in practice games. They're really, really funny. They are very swingy as well. I've had great success and great failure with them. The ambush is particularly what I want it for. I'm going to drop it in turn 2, turn 3 against already weakened units or against objectives that haven't been captured yet. I'm hoping that with the 9 attacks and the rending and the poison, the different variants there, that it will have decent damage output. It is a bit squishy though, only to have 6, so if he gets isolated, I fully expect to lose him. Next up, we've got the company leader attached to the weapons team. So I've doubled up the weapons team to a total of 6. And the company leader is my general for the game. He has the Take Aim perk from Forward Observer, which grants the weapons team +1 to their quality. So they're shooting at 4 pluses now instead of 5 pluses. The fact that the weapons team are 3 wounds each means that the enemy will have to chip away quite a lot at them to even get to my leader. So I'm hoping he'll be nice and secure before he takes any wounds. But I'll just have to watch out for snipers, of course. I've taken 2 heavy machine guns, and then I've taken an autocannon and 3 missile launchers. I'm hoping that the AP and the deadly from the missile launchers will be enough to actually whittle down some of the opponent's defences, but they are the human defence force, and they're not exactly known for their armour piercing either. So I've decided to use some old Cadian models and an old Katachan for Sergeant Harker there for my second machine gun. Next is the Storm Leader attached to some Stormtroopers. So I've used my Orlocks from a Necromunda campaign here because I thought they looked like a ragtag commando unit. Storm Leader with a plasma pistol. I've given him the Munition perk, which grants Focus Fire, which is +1 AP. So that is really good because they're AP1 as standard this unit. It's a bolstering to AP2. So hopefully they'll be able to take some chinks out of well-armoured units, but we'll see. I've given them ambush as well because, like the assassin, I want them to be able to drop in turn 2, turn 3 against some unguarded objectives or target more weakened units. Then I've got the sniper squad. I'm taking these purely because of their scout ability, able to move after deployment up to 12 inches. If my opponent has put his general or a valuable target in range, then I will just take some pot shots off. I don't expect them to survive very long because they've only got defense 5, so I need to keep them in cover and make the most out of it. There's no way I can bolster their AP1, unfortunately, so I don't think they'll be that good against very highly armoured targets. Then I've got another company leader attached to my special weapons squad. I've swapped out the weapons for 6 flamethrowers, 36 attacks as standard, then with a relentless, which means 6s get to generate an extra attack die. So I'm hoping that the volume there will be enough to put some enemies down. I've also granted the company leader the Forward Observer perk, which grants Take Aim. And then I'm hoping to combine that with the first extra action that I've learned about, which is Focus Fire, which means if they stay still and shoot at a unit within 12 inches, which is their maximum range anyway, they get +1 to their quality. So they'd actually be hitting on 3s. It's probably a bit of a ballsy tactic because I don't really want models getting within charge range of them because they will die. But we'll see how that plays out. And then I've got a support vehicle, my Basilisk there. I'm going to be literally planting that at the back of the field so it can take pot shots at infantry blobs with its blast attacks. I don't expect it to do anything else, but if anything does get up close and personal to it, it's got a heavy flamethrower to repel them and a hunter missile to take on any nasties with high armor. And finally, I've got my Light Walker, which I'm using the Archon Studios Mammoth Walker for because I really love that model. I've given it a heavy frame, which grants tough 3, so it's now tough 9 instead of the regular tough 6, represented by the fact it's got 4 legs instead of 2. I've given it the rapid plasma cannon, which is blast damage again, but at a higher armor piercing, and it's also got a hunter missile. I've taken this because of the scout again, so it can move forward and target some vulnerable units right off the bat. So that's my army list, and let's go into game 1 and see who my opponent is. My first opponent was Ed, bringing the High Elf fleets. I've played many times against them, and they are very mobile, most of the units having very fast, and just all around very good at nabbing objectives. I'm quite happy that the matchup I've got is a killy game, because I'd describe the High Elf fleets as glass cannons. They have some powerful armor piercing, but their defense is not the best. So I'm quite happy with this matchup going in. All I have to do is stay out of range and pepper him with fire, and I should be okay. Let's see how I get on. So game 1 is called Mutually Assured Destruction, and the objective is relatively simple. Try and wipe out as many of your opponent's models as possible. Now, the way that the victory points are calculated is based on the percentage of wounds that you do to your enemy. So, for example, if the enemy has 100 wounds worth of models, and I dealt 90 wounds, then I would get 9 victory points out of a maximum of 10. There are secondary objectives in play as well, such as kill the general, defeat your opponent's unit with the highest number of wounds, have the turn 4 end with one of your units in the enemy deployment zone, as well as forcing an enemy unit to rout. So up for grabs, there's a total of 14 victory points. I'm confident in the matchup. I think with my firepower, I should be okay. So let's see how I get on. After winning deployment, I opt to use my scout and my walker's scout ability to move them into position in cover. I then opt to use my support vehicle's artillery blast attacks. 2 attacks, 36-inch range, each blast 6. They both hit. I was targeting Ed's defenders that are lurking in the ruins, and because blast ignores cover, it cuts through them quite easily because they've only got a defense 5, and it only leaves 1 model standing. It was a really impressive way to start the game. In retaliation, Ed wants to target my HQ unit, which is attached to the weapons team, so he moves his flyer over. He says it's got a psychic ability. I wasn't aware of this. I didn't know ships could have psychic abilities. And it doesn't go off, but with the actual shooting attacks that it does to the weapons team, he manages to take out both of the heavy machine guns and put the auto cannon onto 1 wound. But it's their turn to retaliate. With the company leaders' take aim buff, they're hitting on 4s. The 3 missile launchers have lock on, so they ignore the penalty to distance when targeting an aircraft. And all 3 missile launchers hit, each with armor piercing 2, deadly 3 capability. Ed misses 2 of the rolls, and it takes the flyer off, which was really impressive as well. Then, using his armor, he moves his APC up to face off against the walker in the ruins, and manages to do a couple of wounds to it. My walker fires back, and manages to deal 3 wounds to it as well. So leaving it only on 3 wounds. I think my walker was on about 8 wounds at this point because I'd given him the tough upgrade. Then moving back over to Ed's turn, he targets my snipers that are in the ruins. He can't quite hit the weapons team with his bike squad, so he aims for the snipers instead. They've got quite a lot of attacks, pump them out, and even with the -1 stealth and -1 cover, they still cut through the defenses and take out the 2 ratlings, which is a shame because they didn't get to do anything. I rolled the dice to test whether he's pinned, and unfortunately he failed, so the unit was pinned. Then moving back to me, I decide to move my flamers away from the support vehicle and into cover, which proves to be a tactical mistake, because after Ed moves his single defender out of cover to move up the board, it's his turn to continue activating as I've used all my units. He moves his second bike squad up into range of the flamers, and with 1 round of shooting, he takes 4 of them out. Really bad mistake on my part because they're not going to be very effective now. They need the volume of dice to be effective. Then, with his final activation for the turn, he decides to disembark his Banshee squad, which has the Elven Noble attached, and they rush my Walker. Now, because it's 6 inches away, they're eligible for a heavy charge, which means they get +1 to their quality. Heavy charge being one of the extra actions used in the tournament. So they're hitting on 2s, and they do a tremendous amount of damage. They leave the Walker on 3 wounds, so he doesn't manage to do any damage back either, which is quite annoying. So at the end of the turn, I've dealt 2 big blows, taking out almost a whole squad and the flyer. So not a bad position to be in, but I did make some mistakes. At the beginning of turn 2, I play my Spy Assassin near to Ed's APC. I don't activate it first, however. I opt to use my support vehicle again, trying to repeat the luck from turn 1. I target his Banshee squad, which are hidden in the ruins next to my Light Walker, because I fear they will destroy it in the next round of combat. I do 2 attacks with the blast weapons, and they both fail. I then try to target the APC, as you can split weapons between 2 targets, and I use the missile launcher, but that fails as well, so a really poor start to turn 2 for me. Ed actually subverts my expectations. He moves around and tries to target the Spy Assassin instead with his Banshee squad, rather than engaging with the Light Walker. They managed to ping 2 wounds against the Assassin, as they had rending, and that nullifies his regeneration, and he didn't manage to save them, so he goes down to 4 wounds. On the attack back, however, he gets 9 attacks as standard, but because poison is the condition on the weapon, 6s explode. He had 3 6s, meaning that the total amount of hits that he put out was 13, and this was enough to see off the whole squad as well as the Elven Noble, earning me a victory point quite early on in the game. It's not there over there, however, for him, because he activates immediately afterwards, targeting the APC with his pistol. Now, rather than having poison on the pistol, it has rending instead. It's not as lucky as his combat roll, however. He gets several hits, no rending though, but it is enough to deal another 2 wounds to the APC, putting it on 1 wound. It takes the pin test, but passes annoyingly, which means it can still deal damage back, which it does do. It tries to shoot the assassin back, and it does another wound onto him, but still not enough to kill him, which is good. Then with my Walker, I move that forward to target the bike squad, dealing enough wounds to take one of them out. Later on in the turn, my heavy weapons team have targeted his bike squad, taking one of them out as well, the other bike squad, I should say. They try to retaliate, and they deal a lot of damage, leaving me with only 2 missile launchers and my general intact. Not ideal, as that squad has actually got 2 victory points attached to it. It's the toughest squad, and it's got my leader in, so I need it to survive. Otherwise, Ed runs the risk of getting more victory points. Luckily, they survive the round of shooting, though. Then, at the end of the turn, I decide I need to bring in my stormtroopers on turn 3 and think about where to put them, whether to commit to the right flank where all the combat is, or to hold them back for something else. His bikes have just moved up there, as you can see. They take shots at my Walker again and do a bit more damage, but still not enough to see it off. And now we move into turn 3. At the start of turn 3, I opt to deploy my stormtroopers in ambush into the ruins where my lone sniper is still hiding. Ed doesn't target them immediately, and with his first activation, he moves his APC up to target my support vehicle, unloading all the weapons into the tank. It's not enough to see it off, however, leaving it with 3 wounds still standing. I, at this point, think that I can't actually use the support vehicle's weapons for anything else, as most of the blob units are gone. I may be able to ping one of his bikes off with one of the missile launchers, but I think it would be funny at this point to ram the APC with my support vehicle. It only has 1 wound left, so I thought, what's the worst that could happen? And then it would be in a better position, actually, to target the bikes should it survive. He rams in, impacts 6, and it's enough to wipe the APC off the board. Really, really good use of that support vehicle this game, I thought. Then Ed decides to move his 1 jet bike squad up to target my weapons team with my leader attached to it. The shooting is horrible, and it wipes the squad down just so that the general is left standing. Not good. He probably won't survive the game after this point, I thought, but it is my fault for leaving him out in the open. But with the firepower, they have done quite well. Try and move my walker forward a bit, but then I realised that it's actually pinned from the last game, so I don't bother doing anything with it. I opt to use my flamer squad and target the lone defender that has popped into the ruins by my walker. After I realise I've rolled the incorrect amount of dice, so I re-roll and do enough damage to see him off. Ed then thinks of trying to finish off my general, as he's only on a couple of wounds. He moves his other bike squad across into the crater for cover and targets my leader. And lo and behold, my prediction came true. He does enough damage to get past my defences, and my general gets taken off the board in turn 3. So Ed turned himself a victory point there as well. Well done, Ed. I moved my sniper out to try and have a pot shot back at those bikes. He fails, as they manage to save the hit. And then Ed's out of activation, so it's all on me. I moved my stormtroopers forward. I've only got clear line of sight with 2 of the models. They both fail their shots as well, so they've really not earned their keep this game, coming in turn 3 and not performing. Shame on you, stormtroopers. So it's up to me then just to unpin my walker and then move my my spy assassin, up the field to see if he can do anything, as he's got fast. So I've just moved him, and that's the end of turn 3. Or moves his jetbike squad into my deployment zone to secure the secondary objective of having a unit in the enemy deployment zone. This reminds me I need to do the same, and luckily I can move my spy assassin into the ruins on the far side of the board to also claim that objective. However, Ed still has his other bike squad to activate, and with their very fast, they can move around the ruins to try and target him with a shot, something I didn't count on. They fire, but luckily for me, they don't do enough wounds, and the spy assassin survives, thus claiming the objective. There's nothing else for us to really activate at this point that would have any impact, so we end the game, and that's game 1. So after game 1, not a bad result. I got 9 victory points out of a total of 10 for the main objective, due to the amount of models of Eds that I killed, and I also secured 3 of the 4 secondary objectives. I killed the general in turn 2 with my spy assassin, who performed amazingly in that melee combat. He then secured the second secondary objective by ending the game in Ed's deployment zone. And then for the third secondary objective, I took out the toughest unit, which happened to be the defenders, which I wiped off the board pretty much in the first shot of the game. So not a bad result. 12 victory points out of 14 in game 1. Let's see if I can continue over to turn 2. But first, let's find out who I'm playing. Erin's my second opponent, bringing the Wormhole Demons of Plague. I saw this list and I think I screamed internally, purely because the Human Defense Force don't have a lot of rending. Rending's the only thing that can really counter regeneration. Everything on this list has regeneration. So I had one armor piercing 4 unit, which is my walker, and that's the only thing which is really going to be able to put a dent in this. So this is not a matchup that I'm looking forward to. My only hope is that I can just hang at the back of the field if there's some objectives there, hang on to them, but I'm not going to be pushing into enemy territory because if they get into melee, I'll be swarmed. That's probably the reason why they're called Plague Swarms. So let's see how the second game goes. Game 2 was an objectives-based game. There were 5 objectives randomly placed on the table for us to capture. Each objective held at the end of the game was worth 3 victory points. Objectives are sticky, meaning that if a unit moves onto them and then moves off them, it remains in their control until an enemy unit takes it. Additionally, the objectives were generating special effects. For example, if I were to move into a unit, I would roll a d6, and what the result would then be looked up on a table, and it could give a positive or a negative modifier to any unit within 3 inches. The way that we calculate objectives being captured in this is based on the number of wounds around the 3-inch buffer zone. So, for example, a tough 6 model would not hold an objective against a squad of 10 individual models. They would have supremacy. If the wounds are equal, then the objective is contested and no one owns it. So, my big concern with this is that the Demons list has ambush and stealth. They can deploy either or. So I don't know what Aaron's going to do, but let's find out, shall we? After winning deployment, I opt to deploy most of my forces to the back left corner of the board, with the exception of the Light Walker and my snipers, which I move up using their stealth ability. The Light Walker hops onto one objective. Aaron deploys 4 of their 6 units in Scout as well, which allows them to claim another 4 of the objectives. This is not a good start for turn 1 for me, because that means straight away that they're held and I need to actually unbudge them now. So, in my first activation, I decided to use my support vehicle to target the Plague Swarm, which is on the central objective, to try and wipe them out. The blast damage, only one of them hits, so 6 hits, but with the regen, and it just does nothing. There's nothing, no AP. AP doesn't really work against the save 6 unit anyway, so I chip away a wound, but the blob remains. In retaliation, Erin moves the blob forward a bit to secure the central objective, definitely. It has a roll of a 6 on it, which means that any unit within 3 inches gets +1 to their melee. The blob moves around just to get a bit of cover, and then tries to use the psychic ability on my walker, but luckily for me, it doesn't go off. It then descends into a bit of tit for tat, so I move my walker out of cover to try and blow the mob to pieces. Again, I'm not really thinking here. I think AP is going to do something because it's got AP4 on its blast attacks, but it's useless against things with a defense of 6 anyway. They both hit. Erin reminds me that I need to roll for the objective that was tucked into the ruin, which I do, and it's booby-trapped, meaning that I have to take a dangerous terrain test if I move within 3 inches of it. This deals 1 damage to my walker. But the 2 attacks hit on the blob and does a couple more points of damage, but nothing major. With his missile launcher, I try to target the Plaguefly Riders, and that fails, so no damage there. Erin then moves the Riders up, rolling for the objective, which becomes an ordinary objective, and they're tucked behind the far side of the ruin. Then for me, I'm determined to try and take out this central blob because they're annoying me at this point. I think all tact has gone out of the window straight away on turn 1, so I move out my weapons team out of cover to get a better line of sight at the blob. Even with 2 of the missile launchers hitting and a couple of shots from the machine guns, still no major damage and not enough to force a route or a pin test or anything. So really just they are soaking up ammo, a true bullet sponge in every sense. Then Erin uses the second Plague Swarm unit tucked in the ruins that you can't see on the camera to try and target my walker again. Once again, it doesn't go off, so I'm okay. With my last activation, I put my flamers on to Overwatch because they've only got a 12-inch range, and I'm terrified of when the Ascended Harbinger of Plague is going to drop in, so I think having some models on Overwatch is going to do some good. The objective the Plague Swarm is in the ruins is on. That is an ordinary objective. And with Erin's final turn, they move the Plaguefly Riders, the second unit, up to secure that final objective, which also gives a buff to melee. +2 AP to their melee, which is terrible as they have poison as well, which means 6 is multiplied by 3. Aaron gets 3 6s, so 9 hits at AP2, which is actually enough to see my walker off the board. Really, really sad as the walker didn't get to do anything this game. There's a lot of points tied up in one model, and yeah, a bit sad to see him go so early on in the game, but it is what it is. I then become all consumed by wiping out this Plague Swarm unit in the center of the board. It's all about vengeance. It's all I can do. So with my activation, I decide to use my support vehicle again to try and target them and chip away at them. But both attacks miss annoyingly, and they're not within range of the missile launcher, so my support vehicle was worse than useless this time. Erin then uses the second Plague Swarm squad hid in the ruins to the right there to target my snipers, forcing a difficult terrain test, or dangerous terrain test, with their banner ability, but they pass, so it's okay. They retaliate by targeting the champion attached to the central Plague Swarm, but don't do any damage. Then Erin puts the Plaguefly Riders on the right flank onto a defensive stance position, and then I use my weapons team to try and chip away at the blob again, doing a couple more wounds, but nothing major. Really difficult to take out this blob, and it's really starting to affect my morale. Then, with the last activation, Erin moves the second Plaguefly Riders around to the side of the ruin to secure the objective on the next turn. Erin and I both have to deploy our remaining units from ambush in turn 3, otherwise they can't contest objectives. So I deploy my Spy Assassin on the right flank to take on the Plaguefly Riders. Erin deploys the Harbinger of Plague centrally to take on my heavy weapons team. And then I have a choice to make. Where do I put my Stormtroopers? I decide to move them centrally on the board, near Erin's deployment zone, and near to the central objective that the Plague Swarm have now moved off, because I think I can either try and contest the objective or run into the deployment zone to try and score a VP at the end of the game. And then Erin deploys the Plague Walkers on the left flank to target my support vehicle, or so I think. I'm scared at this point because the gap is closing and Human Defense Force are crap in melee, and I don't know what I'm going to do if the gap gets any shorter. Team. Before they can attack, however, I use the Flamers and their Overwatch to try and deal some damage, but I only manage one measly wound against him. He then swings with all his might to take out my weapons team, forcing a rout and killing my general in the process, which means Erin scores 3 VP in one round of combat, which is really, really good, but really bad for me. I then think, well, the Plague Walkers are probably the next threat because they're the closest, so I use my support vehicle to target them. One of the blast attacks hits, but doesn't do enough to actually have any meaningful effect on the unit. It only pings one of the models, annoyingly, and the missiles fail as well. So, yeah, not a good round of shooting following up an excellent round of combat. This is it. I think the support vehicle is going to get it now from the Plague Walkers, but I'm wrong. Erin actually moves them round to target my special weapons squad and the Flamers. Again, I'm dreading this because combat is not their forte. They need flame and distance to be able to do their thing. And in this round of combat, I lose all of my Flamers, with the exception of the company leader, who manages to stick in there. And yeah, he's not phased, just keeping on doing his thing, which is good. I then use my Spy Assassin to target the Plaguefly Riders. They currently have defensive stance, which is -2 to me hitting them, but they can't fight back. And with my 9 attacks, I do manage to do a couple of wounds, which is nice. But that's it, really. All I've got left are my Stormtroopers, really, to do anything with. And my snipers as well. So Erin moves the central blob of the Plague Swarm up to the crater where my snipers are. Um, they have to take a dangerous terrain test because of the crater, and that actually takes one of the blobs off because they failed their dangerous terrain test roll, and it's more effective than my guns have been. The following combat I'm dreading because I think snipers are not known for their combat ability, even amongst the human defense force. But luckily for me, they all survive as the Plague Swarm whiff all their hits, so nothing to worry about there. In retaliation, they don't do any hits in melee, but when they activate next, they try and shoot the Plague Champion. But they're not very effective. The stealth on the unit, -1 to hit, means that they can't get any hits off, really. So now I'm having to consider my options of what's really left. Not much, and I'm just watching and waiting to see what my Stormtroopers can do on the next activation. Erin moves the Plaguefly Riders around to capture the objective that was previously held by my Light Walker. So it leaves it down to me to move my stormtroopers. So I moved them within 3 inches of the central objective, uh, so they can try and get some shots off at that central blob. Only one of them hit because of the stealth, and that doesn't actually deal any wounds, so very inefficient there. It also puts my guys out in the open. I've totally forgot about the second plague swarm hiding in that ruin, which Erin proceeds to do something with in a minute. But first, they move the plague fly riders around to take in my spy assassin, and they can strike as normal now, and they do 3 wounds to him. Really, really painful, as he's only got 6 wounds. And the strike back is not very efficient. I don't deal anything purely because he has to hit on 6s now because he's fatigued from the first round of combat. So they win the combat, but I don't. He doesn't lose his morale, so that's it. I'm out of activations. Erin moves the second plague swarm out of the ruin, uses muscular dystrophy, the psychic ability, on my stormtroopers, which causes a wound, and I lose the guy with the pistol. Not too bad, really. I was expecting more losses, and that's the turn. In the fourth turn, I am seriously in trouble. There's not much that can be done, and I spend most of the turn discussing with Erin about what is actually achievable. I realise that 4 of the objectives are not up for grabs. I lose most of my stormtroopers to the plague swarm in Erin's first activation, leaving me with only the storm leader with the plasma pistol. So I am running out of options. I attempt a shoot attack with the spy assassin into the plague fly riders on the right flank, dealing some wounds, and then it's basically a case of just seeing whether he can survive the combat, the following combat from those plague fly riders. Luckily for me, the spy assassin does, and in the combat, when he gets to return attacks, he manages to kill 2 of them and knock one down to 1 wound, meaning that from a number of wounds perspective, which is how we're calculating who wins the objective, my spy assassin actually takes the 1 objective. I then managed to move my plasma storm leader, loop him round the plague swarm into the deployment zone to score a VP as well. But at the end of the game, it's very, very one-sided. Erin has taken 4 of the objectives and got all 4 secondaries as well, for a whopping total of 16 victory points against my 4. But an excellent game, terrifying army. So after the second game, I took an absolute beating. Only 4 victory points out of a total of 19, so not a great performance. I am a bit shaken after that, and going into game 3, I'm going to need to pick up the slack in hope of recovering. So let's find out who I'm playing in game 3. My third opponent was Sam with the Prime Lizards, his take on the Salamanders. Not too bad a list looking at it. I was worried about the defense 2 across the board again with the armor piercing, but the advantage is that being quite elite troops, they're not that numerous, so I may be okay sort of having more activations, and as long as I stay out of close combat from those aggro squads with their nasty armor piercing 4 dual energy fists, I could be okay. So let's see how I get on. Game 3 is an interesting one. It is called HVT, High Value Target. We each have to assign a model in our army, aside from our general, to be our high value target. The opponent will get points if they wound or kill our target, and likewise we'll get points if we do the same to them. The secondary objectives from game 1 and 2 are still in play as well. I have picked my spy assassin to be my high value target, and Sam has picked a member of the aggro squad, which his general is actually attached to. So I'm actually going to have to go through that squad and kill the HVT in order to attack the general. It's an interesting choice. We'll see how it plays out for him. Additionally, points are gained as well for having your high value target outside of your deployment zone. So there's actually sort of a bonus if you play a bit aggressively with them and don't just keep them back. So with my ambush, I fully intend to use that with the spy assassin to get him out of deployment zone, because he's not going to be deploying in the deployment zone. So hopefully that'll be a guaranteed point. But without further ado, here is game 3. I have some bad news, and that is that I reviewed the footage for game 3 and it became corrupted. So rather than have any nice visuals to show you, you're going to have to listen to me just talk at you. So this game was an interesting one. In the first turn, Sam took out my support vehicle with his ATV straight away before I even got any shots off with it. Really demoralising, and it made me overcompensate by pushing my light walker into harm's way, and that got taken out of commission as well by one of the aggro squads, the one with the high value target in fact. I then watched my squads get obliterated over the next 2 turns. I lose my snipers, all of my flamers save the company leader, and the only squad I have really in effect is my heavy weapons team at the back of the board, who I've kept there just for safety. They fire shots into the aggro squad with a HVT, and by turn 3 they've managed to kill him and are now trying to take out the general. In turn 3 as well, I deploy my spy assassin into the deployment zone, into Sam's deployment zone rather, where he has an aggro squad waiting in ambush for me. Really, really scary, this squad, so I opt to use the defensive stance action, which means that I can force any enemy units engaging me in combat to add +2 to their quality. Really needed it, because those aggro squads have 4 attacks each, all armor piercing 4 at quality 3, so that would have been enough to probably get a lot of wounds through if 12 of those hits had hit. Luckily, with the quality 5+ now, he survived unscathed and managed to deal a couple of wounds back. He stayed there till the end of the game. Sam manages to move his general into my deployment zone to score a VP, and he causes one of my units to root as well. So at the end of the game, Sam scored 2 VP just from the 2 secondary objectives. I score 7 for killing his high value target, and then I get an additional 1 for having my spy assassin in the deployment zone, and I get another 1 because I caused one of Sam's units to root as well. So 9 points there. Not bad, middling, maximum of 11 for that game. So all in all, not too bad. Bit of a step up from the last game. And now moving into the 4th and final game. My final opponent for the day was Ryan with his Robot Legions. I've played Robot Legions in tournaments before. They're another regen army, and but they have the negative of the fact that most of them are slow. I will just play it by ear. They've gotten very nasty weaponry. Some of them can spit out poison. Luckily for me, none of the units here have that. But the war sites on the Guardians are ones to watch out for, because they could kill my walker or my support vehicle instantly just by getting into base contact with it. So I'm hoping that won't be the case. I know that the Annihilator Lord and the Guardians have ambush as well, so I'll just be watching where they drop in and try and plan accordingly. Let's see how it goes. Final game of the tournament. For the 4th and final game of the tournament, we had to split the board into thirds. We would then roll a d6 for each of our units, and depending on what number came up, we would deploy them into a third accordingly. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The same would apply for ambushing units, except it would cover the whole length of the board rather than our deployment zone. Each of us then could place an objective anywhere on our deployment line, for basically the enemy to pillage. If the enemy moved into base contact with it and was holding it at the end of any turn, the objective would be sacked and they would be able to claim 5 victory points. The secondary objectives are in play again. So let's see how I got on in the 4th and final game. Bad filming where a lot of the footage got lost, but I'll give a recap with some footage behind of what happened in game 4. So we've both split our units to deploy across the 3/3 of the board. I managed to move my snipers up to try and start shooting at the squad which is hogging the objective on Ryan's deployment side. Don't manage any wounds there, and the game turns into a bit of cat and mouse. We're trying to gauge each other's strengths but not overcommit. My objective is at the back right of the board, which you can't currently see on screen. My assassin and my stormtroopers are still in ambush. I'm just put them on the ruins because I had nowhere else to put them on the board. And I'm trying to obviously gauge how I can actually get to the objective at this point. If my ambush rolls are bad, I may be on the first segment or the second segment, which will get me nowhere near the objective. Ryan's flyer tries to target my support vehicle and doesn't manage to do that many wounds to it. And then in the subsequent turn, it moves across the board on the trajectory that it's on. And my weapons team on Overwatch managed to blow it out of the sky through the robot rules and the basically, if it reduces to less than half wounds, it has to do a robot test, which it did do, and I forced it to rout, which got me a victory point later on. Um, Later on in the game, Ryan manages to deploy his general and the attached unit, which have awesome weaponry. They kill my walker, but luckily my flamer squad manages to block them from getting near the objective. I can't deploy anywhere near uh, the enemy objective, and I end up putting my stormtroopers just at the back so I can claim the unit in the deployment zone objective. The game plays out really slowly, and at the end of it, neither of us have managed to destroy each other's objective, but that's okay because our objectives are intact. We managed to earn 4 victory points each. I get a victory point for having my unit in the enemy deployment zone, and I get a victory point for uh, routing a unit as well. So 6 VP, and Ryan only got 5 because he kept his objective secure and he had an enemy, or he had a unit in my deployment. Sorry. So a very evenly matched game. I thought I was going to get decimated by the robot lords, but really glad to see that it was more evenly matched. Overall, quite a nice little end to the tournament, a slow paced game where there were no real risks or threats. So, yeah, that is the end of game 4. So, fourth game over, and another 6 victory points in the bag. So, 3 wins, 1 loss. Not a bad outcome, I thought, for a force which were jokey on paper and played rather efficiently. If I were to do anything differently, I'd probably get rid of the special weapons and the flamers and swap them out for something a bit more resilient. They just couldn't perform well enough with their defense 5. No buffs, really, apart from the take aim. Needed something a bit more tough to basically hold positions. It's a shame, really, because I love those models and I just wanted to use them. Overall, 4 really good games, 4 excellent opponents. Sam, I'm really sorry about the footage being corrupted, mate, because that was an excellent game, especially with you blowing my support vehicle out of the water. But honestly, couldn't have gone better. I was pleasantly surprised to find that I'd actually ranked second in the tournament overall, or joint second rather, with John also getting the same amount of points with a Robot Lords list. In first place was Erin with the Wormhole Demons of Plague, the second game I played. Obviously, that was a very, very tough list to go up against, and not surprising, really. Really resilient to most scenarios, and Erin's an excellent commander. So I am very, very happy that they placed first. Obviously, got some improvements to do for the next time. Couple of other things to touch on there before we close this video off. Just as a little thing that we do with our tournaments locally, we have a bit of a painting competition. So I thought I'd showcase some of the armies and models that everyone else brought along, just so you can see the variety that we're playing on the day. And then after that, I'll just do a quick recap, and then that'll be it. So here's some of the nice models that were playing in the games at the tournament. So first off, we have Erin's Plague Demons list. Really, really vibrant colours there. Nice use of the purple and orange contrasts to make a really, really coherent army. And another nice sort of juxtaposition to my drab human defence force. Really dirty and horrible looking, as you'd expect Plague Demons to look. So I think they've done a really good job there. Then we've got the Havoc Disciples classic corn models being used, which I absolutely love. It's always good when you see the vintage models get some time on the tabletop. Nice, vibrant red scheme across the board. I think that Sam, who was running this list, I think he only had one shooter unit. The rest was just purely chain axe, chain sword. So trying to obviously march across the board and hack the enemy to pieces. Didn't pay off too well for him though. But hats off to such a good effort. They're a cracking army. Then we've got Ryan, who I played in game 4 with his Robot Lords army there. Lovely use of contrasting colours again. Really vibrant electric blues and nice orange and yellows on some of the Gauss weaponry as well. Really, really came together. It's such a beautiful force to look at when playing. Almost distracting. Then another angle on Robot Lords, we had John, who came in joint second with his army here. He opted to use vintage Games Workshop Necrons from 2nd, 3rd edition, all monoposed metals, which I think are absolutely cracking. You know, some of those old scoops have just so much about them, and it is nice to see them get love and attention and a chance to play with them again. Then we have another Sam who was using the Templar Brothers, well, Prime Brothers, but I'll call them Templar Brothers so we know what we're on about. Again, some nice old school models there, old Termies, and some of the old Scouts as well. Great little force. I've played Prime Brothers a lot, so I know that they're excellent on the tabletop. So I'm sure he did fine. Then we have the salamander, or the prime lizards, as another Sam dubbed them. Sam, who I played my 3rd game against. Unfortunately, you couldn't see the footage, but this is what I was up against. Lovely, lovely color scheme here. Excellent work on all of the models. Especially love the vibrancy of the purple on the librarian there at the front. Great, really, really aggressive force, and quite scary and intimidating to play against, actually. And then to loop back to Ryan, we had the painting competition at lunch between games 2 and 3, and Ryan won it with this model. Like I say, he's done a cracking job with his colour schemes there. He's also active on Instagram. I'll put his Instagram in the description below if you want to check out what he's working on, but I think that's a very well-deserved £10 gift voucher there. So well done, Ryan. With that little focus on the painting competition out of the way, it's time to bring the video to a close. I hope you've enjoyed the battle reports that I've put in this video, as well as my coverage of the tournament in general. If you want to see more Grimdark future coverage, as well as focus on other smaller game systems, please consider liking, subscribing, and ringing the bell for notifications. This channel is in its infancy, and I am trying to grow it, so any little that you can do to help would be greatly appreciated. Just before I sign off, a couple of shout outs. Thanks to Ed for organising the tournament. Really, really good job. Looking forward to the next one. And thanks to Worcester Wargames for hosting us. If you're ever in Worcester, please check them out. Also look on their website. I've put the website in the description below. And if you can, always support local. But that's all I've got to say, really. So thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you on the next one.